1988 in Atlanta, Georgia. And our first guest tonight is Mrs. Dolores Wilkinson. Mrs. Wilkinson attended the 1984 Democratic Convention as well as the 1988 Democratic Convention, both times as a Jackson delegate. Is that correct?
That's right. I was the Jackson delegate from the 5th Congressional District in '84 and in '88.
Since you had an opportunity to attend both conventions, why don't you start us off by giving us some your impressions of the difference between the 1984 convention and the 1988 convention?
Well, of course, the 1984 convention, as you remember, was in San Francisco, and it was highly successful for us who were supporting Reverend Jackson for the simple fact that it was the first time that a black candidate had made it all the way to the convention site. And of course, Reverend Jackson at that time, I suppose, came in third. Of course, this time in Atlanta, he was very definitely the runner-up in second place. And the significant difference was that in San Francisco, Reverend Jackson had about 465 delegates that he had won throughout the campaign, and this time there were 3 times that many, well over 1,200.
So there was an enormous increase in the number of Jackson delegates between 1984 and 1988.
There was, and also, although the '84 delegation, Jackson delegation, represented different ethnic groups and different persons with different concerns, this time it was far more. It was really a much more successful rainbow represented than in '84. Actually, this time I feel sure to say that at least half of the delegates were white and other Indians and Orientals and persons of other ethnic minorities.
Many of us who did not attend the convention had an opportunity to watch it on television. And perhaps you could sort of bring us up to date by giving us your impression of the overview of what went on, excuse me, at Atlanta during that time.
Yes, of course, in the beginning, there were many, many social events. This was what people heard most about before. I think some 250 some registered social events that started over the weekend. And, of course, the individual delegations were having their caucuses. But the official convention began on Monday, and I have a very beautiful program here that carried the convention program. And on the first evening, of course, the delegates we had the various report of the various committees and whatnot, and then we had the keynote address by Ann Richards, which was very outstanding. And then on the second night was the big night that most people know about, and that was the night of the Jackson address. I don't think I need to say anything much about the content of it, because it seems that everybody that I know or that I've met were listening. That is adults, children, and all, regardless, white, black. And of course it really, if you might use the word, stole the show, as he did in 1984. There were some significant differences, I think, in '84. It seems as though in '84, my impression of the address was that Reverend Jackson was trying very hard then to be understood and to introduce and to tell what the rainbow was about, to introduce the rainbow that had brought him that far. And also, he was trying to cleanse himself of the charges that were made that he had feelings that were not, you know, universal as far as his concern.
Anti-Semitic, I think he was accused at the time.
And of course, and so he sort of poured out his heart and won that convention. I remember after the speech was over, we, well, there were tears and strangers came by, I mean, regardless of who they were supporting, and just gave you a big hug, and we danced. The Honolulu delegation was next to us, and they joined with us, and for a good half an hour, I guess, after the speech, pandemonium went on, because people just could not, it seems, they were expressing their emotions. And after that, although the session was not over for that day, the hall emptied. The speakers who came after that had no one to listen because it was as if someone had said the benediction and everybody just left and went home. This time, the speech was very outstanding, and again, Reverend Jackson did a magnificent job of telling or trying to make the nation see and the world see where we were all on common ground. And I think the beautiful example that he made to make even to the children understand was the example of his grandmother and the patchwork quilt, and letting people know in various, regardless of their interests or identification, that whatever their differences and their problems and their beefs were, that their complaint, their patch, equating it to the quilt by itself was not big enough, that the only way that people could make significant progress to solve their problems would be to come together with others who had complaints and who would bring their patch and put them together to create a work of art, as the quilt was, or to really make significant changes in the American way of life.
Now, as a Jackson delegate, you also had an opportunity to meet with him shortly after the speech, did you not? And there's a message that I think that he gave to all of his delegates to take back to the community, and I wish that you would share that message with us today.
All right. It was really necessary because in spite of his speech that night, and of course, you know, the next night came the nomination, and although Reverend Jackson had even led in the popular vote up to, well, after the Michigan election, when he won Michigan by some, I think, 70%, and it seems as though all hell broke loose of sort of systematic strategies to keep him from going any further, or from certainly winning the nomination. And so there were states that he won, many states there, some of them headed for the first time by black chairmen. Even the state of Mississippi's delegation was headed by a black chairman. And so when we were there, and to see states that he had won, and that the Dukakis campaign would get as many or sometimes more of delegates than he got. So that was hard to take and left some of us feeling quite sick.
And that brings up the whole question of superdelegates that we want to talk about.
Yes, and that, of course, that came about as the superdelegates cast their vote, and regardless of where they were from, states where Jackson won or what, they cast them for Dukakis and did not represent the feelings of their constituencies.
Very good. Let me thank you for talking about this small element today, and we'll be back with you following this commercial break.